Hey there, friends. Thanks so much for joining and being here today. I'm praying for you. Please keep praying for me. And I pray that you are experiencing grace and hope and life in the middle of this time. I know that so many are experiencing stress. We find that stress gets exploded out of people sometimes. Like it comes out in other situations because we're upset in one place. We get upset in a bigger way in another situation. I've been seeing that happen in some friends' lives recently. And so I just know there's a lot of stress out there for people. It's hard. It's a season of challenge for everybody in so many ways. So we are just pausing to find some of the goodness and the mercy and the power of God available to us in the middle of such a time. The cool thing about God is that there is nothing new under the sun. And so even though this really feels like a horrific, unusual, terrifying time, the world and people have experienced seasons just like this. It just wasn't the same name attached to it. Other realities were going on that were causing this kind of difficult or crisis kind of season. So God still knows what's going on, knows your name, knows mine, as we noticed last week, and is in control. And it's good to remember that in the middle of things that feel out of control or too big to handle. Last week we looked at Exodus chapter 3, the beginning of the story of the call of Moses. So we're going to cover briefly the second part of that story just now. So in the first part, so Moses is 80 years old. He's tending the flock of his father-in-law, Jethro. He's on the far side of the desert. God shows up in an extraordinary way with the burning bush and speaks to him. We noticed last week that God spoke his name twice after getting his attention, and then invited him to take off his sandals because it's on holy ground, and said that he was the God of his father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And then Moses, we read last week, hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. And when we learned about the character of Moses, that he was afraid to look on God. And what might that tell us about his faith development? So that's where our story begins today, right there. And the Lord continued saying, I have seen the suffering of my people because they're taskmasters. I have heard their cry, and I know their sufferings. Therefore, I have come down to take them out of the hand of the Egyptians and lead them into a spacious, good land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the land of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. I have heard the cry of the sufferings of my people, and I've seen their difficulties. And therefore, I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. And Moses said, who am I to go to Pharaoh? And who am I to bring your people out of Egypt? And the Lord said to Moses, I will certainly be with you. And this will be a sign for you that I am with you. After you've brought the people out of Egypt, you will serve God on this mountain. So that's the end. God speaks to Moses. Moses responds, and God promises to be with him at the end. That speech of God, and God repeats it twice. He says, I have seen what they're going through. I have heard their cries, and I know their sufferings. Then he comes back to hearing and seeing them. Twice God says the same language. And what might we learn about the character of God? That he sees, hears, and knows the sufferings of his people. That he knows exactly what they were going through. When we learn about God, and that he has a plan to take him to this spacious land flowing with milk and honey, that's currently the home of other peoples. But God says, no, I'm setting apart this land for you. When we learn about the character of God, about his compassion for his people, his love for his people, his presence for his people, what comes to your mind about God? What do you learn? I mean, what else could God have said here? Did he have to deliver the people in the manner that he said? And when we learn about that, he's come down in order to deliver them. And yet says to Moses, therefore, I am sending you. What other choice did God have? Were there more people than Moses among the children of Israel? So what we learn about the character of God, that he chooses this guy, 80 years old, who we noticed last week may feel depressed and desperate and kind of like an exile from his own people and far from them, far from his family for 40 years. And yet God chose him. What might we learn about God's choices of emissaries by this? Moses responds saying, who am I to go to Pharaoh? And who am I to bring your people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt? And like Moses here is like, this is impossible. This is not something I can do. I don't have the ability, the capability. This is way beyond my ability. God responds in a really interesting way, doesn't he? He says, oh, I'll certainly be with you. And this will be a sign. This will be the sign that I am with you. Isn't that interesting? This is a sign I'm with you. After you've done this, brought the people out, you'll worship me on this mountain. This will be the sign. It seems to me God had a lot of choices, and we must learn something that God could have chosen so many other people and has his selection upon Moses and works with Moses a long time to convince him, yeah, you're the guy. And Moses was the guy. And yet Moses didn't believe he was the guy. I don't know. Moses could have responded, hey, yeah, sure, I'm ready, God. You sign me up. He could have, just, bucked up and said, yeah, after taking my shoes off, I feel all confident. But no, he says, who am I? What can we learn about Moses by what he says here? About what he thought of himself or didn't think of himself? I think that sometimes these kind of stories, we allow them to be in the past and we forget that they're about real people with real faith who lived in a real time. Actual real people just like you and me. And the struggle that Moses was having had been a long struggle, a long journey. 400 years in slavery for the people of Israel is a long time. And that God came to him and spoke to him in his manner from the burning bush. And they have a long conversation. It goes on for the next chapter. And so you have this picture of God's coming and patience with this guy to convince him of something. And yet Moses just, who am I? Do you think we might see in Moses some insecurity or a lack of confidence in his own abilities in this? And today, do you think that God calls people that maybe are insecure or have a lack of confidence in themselves to do extraordinary things? I wonder, what might that look like today, that God calls people that feel insecure or lack confidence to do extraordinary things? Have you, or has someone you known, been asked to do something extraordinary that and yet didn't feel capable or ready to do that? God equips those that are called, doesn't he? He doesn't call the equipped, doesn't call the adequate. He makes them adequate. He equips them. Isn't that an amazing reality of life? And here you have Moses that really didn't feel he was capable. And yet, don't we know people? And haven't you been a person that have felt that you didn't measure up to the call that God has placed on you? And perhaps we all are in that call today, right? We're called in this season to live in a certain way, to allow our lives to be of impact to others in this season. May you, friend, continue to be encouraged and strengthened in your life and know the reality of this God who does come down to walk with you and with me in this season. Blessings on you. Have a great day. See you next week. Bye now.